What I think the biggest takeaway yesterday was watching how many people were here. This went from a cottage industry 2 decades ago to today. We're talking about thousands of people. Private equity and private investing is now mainstream. And I think that was one of the biggest takeaways when you look around the room, the excitement about putting capital to work, the need to put capital to work in this asset class to drive returns and asset allocation. I think that really came through in all the conversations.
But does it also feel a bit like peak industry? Because clearly there are so many people here, everybody wants to raise money, and apparently fundraising is an issue.
I think people are trying to find the signal in the noise, right? They're trying to figure out what is actually going on in the environment. And in moments like this, maybe it's peak, but I think people are also trying to come together in the complexity to try to figure out what are we seeing, to compare notes a little bit. I think this is a really important time to be putting capital to work, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Europe, whether it's here in Germany. And I think that was one of the big things being talked about yesterday. It was comparing notes about what are the trends that are you seeing, where are you putting interesting investments into action, and I think that was a lot of the sentiment throughout the day.
Though it still feels also a bit like, at least in some industries, like being in a crisis moment. So there was a lot of comparison also to previous crises like the great financial crisis or dot-com bubble. So how do you feel about the situation also macro-wise?
Yeah, listen, this is not the GFC, right? I think everyone yesterday would agree on that. Now, does it feel a little more probably like the dot-com bubble days? Probably. I think this is a moment, and one of the things that was talked about yesterday throughout the day was there's a gravitational pull right now toward managers who are cycle tested, to folks who are those safe pairs of hands, honestly, like a KKR, who have been around for 5 decades and who understand the pattern recognition, understand how to find interesting places to put capital to work in the complexity. These are complex markets, right? These are not markets for everyone, and to be able to understand how to navigate them is very, very important. And I think that is the gravitational pull that we're seeing right now, even through what may be, to your point, a toppy feel.
Is there kind of a key guideline on how to navigate those difficult markets? What would be sort of your key advice?
Yeah, I think it's go back to basics, right? Remember how you drive returns, how you drive value in a portfolio. Be more than just financial capital, right? And I think it comes down to your operational expertise. How do you drive productivity? How do you drive efficiencies? How do you use technology for the better good of these businesses? And that, I think, at the end of the day, regardless of the market cycle, that's what drives the returns. And the returns are needed more today than ever. When you look at the compression of what we're seeing returns in the public equity markets or in the bond markets, private equity and private investing has to make up for that return gap. And it's not going to be buy low, sell high. It's going to come down to what are you actually doing to effectuate change and be a transformational change agent in the businesses you're buying.
Is it company picking, or is it also industry picking, or is it both?
I think it's both. And I think, a firm like us, we start with themes, right? What are the themes that we're seeing? Digitization, health and wellness, sustainability. And then once you're in those themes, how then do you find businesses that match those themes? And those themes are, by the way, informed by macro events around the world and the trends that we're seeing. Now, I'll pick an example. Digitization is something that I think everyone would agree we need more of in our businesses, right? When you think about workforce and labor shortages, digitization and technology can really help automate businesses. When you think about being change agents, and you're either the disruptor or you're disrupted. So what do you want your business to be? How do you drive those efficiencies? So businesses, we just invested in a company here in Germany called Korber, right? It's a supply chain technologies business, and that is something that we think is very, very important. Another example is in the health and wellness space, right? Regardless of what's happening in the world with inflation or anything else, people still want to have children, right? So to invest in a business like EV, which is one of the leading fertility platforms in the world, those are trends that, regardless of all the complexity around us, those are themes that you can really put capital behind.
Just briefly, if you look into the crystal ball, where are we in 2024 if we meet again?
Hopefully, we will have leveled out a bit in terms of the complexity. I think these markets, run their course, right? And I really do believe if we're standing here next year together, I think the managers that have, like us, who have more resources to pull from and can drive that change in the businesses, I think are going to be the ones that are performing better. And I think we're going to continue to find really interesting places to put capital to work, partnering with families, taking companies private in this environment is really interesting, and I think that will continue over the next several months, probably in the next year. Doing non-core carve-outs of large corporations, I think that's going to continue. So I think when we meet again, all those trends will have just continued to fulfill their promise that we're going to find some really great places to put capital to work.